Dear Jimmy Page, I'm writing to you today because it has come to my attention you may need impressionable young women to join your secret devil worshipping group. Even though you haven't responded to my many other letters, I imagine you are just so overcome with emotion when you read them that it's hard for you to find words to respond with. You were never a very good lyricist anyways. Anyways, the next time you need a severely underage girlfriend or even someone to sacrifice to the Dark Lord for your underground occult worship group, send me an email back. Thanks, Jimmy, for always taking the time to read my fan letters, even if you never reply. Yours truly, Moosh. The taste of my sacrifices. The taste of innocent blood. Oh, shoot. Didn't see you guys there. I was just, mesmerized here by Aleister Crowley and Jimmy Page. Which brings me into the subject of today's video. Is Jimmy Page the devil? Could Jimmy Page really be the devil? I want to talk about Led Zeppelin and the occult, more so maybe Jimmy Page and the occult, and a little bit of Aleister Crowley if you don't know who he is. So, let's get right into it. Led Zeppelin, one of the most influential rock bands of the 20th century. A long-standing association with the occult, largely due to the interests and actions of guitarist Jimmy Page. Whether or not this perception is founded in truth, I find it quite entertaining. So today I will detail some key events and elements that have fueled this association with Led Zeppelin and the occult. First and foremost, we have Jimmy Page and Aleister Crowley. Jimmy Page was a well-known admirer of Aleister Crowley, an English occultist and founder of the religion Thelema or Thelema. I don't know. I'm just moosh. Crowley's philosophies and writings influenced Jimmy Page's interests in mysticism and the occult. But who in the shit is Aleister Crowley, you may ask? Who is he, moosh? Aleister Crowley, he was born around 1875, died in 1947. He was an English occultist, writer, and ceremonial magician. He founded the religion of Thelema, which centers on the principle, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. This was often misinterpreted as a justification for hedonism and lawlessness. He was often dubbed the Great Beast and the most wickedest man in the world for his controversial practices and beliefs. And just a side note, I did in grade 9 get from the library, I think, the Book of the Law. It's red. It looks kind of like a Bible. So that was interesting. I had a hard time interpreting it though, because I think a lot of it was in Latin. But I'd like to see it again, just because why not? Aleister Crowley was a habitual user of drugs, including opium, cocaine, heroin, and he would incorporate them into his magical practices. And of course, this was scandalous and illegal at the time. I think it still is nowadays. Aleister Crowley openly practiced sexual freedom, including bisexuality, the use of sex and magic rituals, and this was considered highly immoral and scandalous in the conservative society of his time. Aleister Crowley was accused of mistreating his followers, engaging in abusive relationships. He probably, I think, manipulated and exposed his disciples both financially and emotionally, which obviously makes sense because cult leaders and they get their ego involved, they're power tripping if they're in charge, kind of makes sense, unfortunately. His work and philosophies have had a significant impact on modern occultism and esotericism. So Aleister Crowley's reputation as a bad figure largely stems from his radical and unconventional lifestyle, his promotion of occult practices, and the sensational nature of his beliefs and actions. His deliberate challenge to societal norms and his embrace of controversial practices made him a figure of infamy and a target of widespread moral panic of his lifetime. So next, we're moving into the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. What is that, you might ask? The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn was a secret society devoted to the study and practice of the occult, metaphysics, and paranormal activities. Aleister Crowley became involved in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn in the late 19th century, around 1898. Aleister Crowley quickly rose through the ranks of the Golden Dawn due to his intelligence, dedication, and magical abilities. Crowley's strong personality and unorthodox methods led to conflicts within the orders. He clashed with Mathers, which was also Samuel Little, who's one of the founders and members, of course. So they clashed over various issues, like his desire for higher degrees and disagreements over magical techniques. Aleister Crowley eventually left the Golden Dawn in 1900. Long time ago, to seek and pursue his own magical path. The Order of the Golden Dawn played a crucial role in the development of the Western esoteric traditions, influencing many of the later occult movements and figures, including Aleister Crowley. Unfortunately, there is no direct evidence or a record that Jimmy Page was ever formally involved with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which of course dissolves eventually in 1903, shortly after Crowley died, and obviously Jimmy Page wasn't even born yet. So that's some pretty cool satanic magic sex club stuff. So what actually connects them, Jimmy Page and Aleister Crowley? So Jimmy Page actually owned an occult bookstore and occult literature publishing company. It was called the Equinox. The name Equinox was inspired by Crowley's biannual journal, the Equinox, which was a significant publication in the world of occultism. So further cementing his connection to Crowley's work and occult literature, the store also used a symbol of Aleister Crowley's as its symbol. Can't a guy just own an occult bookstore and no one get weird about it? And then we have Jimmy Page's house, although he had a bunch of houses. We're talking about this house specifically.
I hope you have a great day. Yeah, you too. Rock and roll.
Which was the Boleskine House. In the early 1970s, Jimmy Page purchased Boleskine House, which is on the shores of Loughness in Scotland. You can take a bus tour there. Why not? I want to one day. Let's go. It was previously owned by Aleister Crowley and was reported to be a site of occult rituals. So some history on Boleskine House. Boleskine House is situated on the shores of Loughness in Scotland, like I previously mentioned. Originally, it was a hunting lodge. The property was built in the 18th century by Archibald Fraser. In the early 20th century, the house was purchased by Aleister Crowley, who used it for his occult rituals. He did most of the rituals from the book Emamele. I have a hard time pronouncing that, excuse me. Crowley's association with the house contributed to its reputation for being haunted and connected to dark magic. Crowley conducted ceremonial rituals from the Book of Emamele, which required 6 months of preparation and intense isolation. These rituals were intended to summon and bind spirits, including guardian angels and demons. And in the 1970s, Jimmy Page, a known admirer of Crowley, bought Boleskine House. Jimmy Page rarely stayed there, but he was fascinated by its occult history. The house changed ownership multiple times and suffered damage from fires in 2015 and 2019. Efforts have been made to restore Boleskine House, and it does remain a site of interest for those intrigued from its mystical significance. Sure, Aleister Crowley was a freaky dude, but aren't there rumors about Boleskine being actually haunted to this day? According to legend, Aleister Crowley, he was called away from the house before completing his rituals, leaving the summoned spirits abound. This often cited for a reason for the house's haunted reputation. Over the years, numerous reports have described strange occurrences at Boleskine House, including disembodied voices, unexplained sounds, shadowy figures, sudden temperature drops, feelings of dread, poltergeist activity, such as objects moving on their own. All that considered, Jimmy Page was said to have only spent maybe 3 weeks there in total, which is kind of crazy, but you got a bunch of houses, so. He has talked openly about his experiences in the house. So in a 1975 interview with Rolling Stone, Jimmy Page elaborates on the haunting. He says, yes, it was owned by Aleister Crowley, but there were 2 or 3 owners before Crowley moved into it. It was also a church that burned to the ground with a congregation in it. That's the site of the house. So strange things have happened in the house that have nothing to do with Crowley. The bad vibes were already there. A man was beheaded there, and sometimes you can hear his head rolling down. I haven't actually heard it, but a friend of mine who is extremely straight and doesn't know anything about anything like that heard it. He thought it was the cats bungling about. I wasn't there at the time, but he did tell the help. Why don't you let the cats out at night? They make a terrible racket rolling down the halls. And they said the cats are locked in a room every night. Then they told him the story about the house, so that sort of thing was there before Crowley even got there. Of course, after Crowley, there have been suicides and people carted off to mental hospitals. Rolling Stone asked, and you don't have any contact with any of the spirits? Jimmy Page says, I didn't say that. I just said I didn't hear the head roll. What's your attraction to the place? The unknown. I'm attracted by the unknown, but I take precautions. I don't go walking into things blind. Do you feel safe in the house? Yeah, well, all my houses are isolated. I just stay home alone most of the time, so I spend a lot of time near the water. Crowley's house is in Loughnan in Scotland. I have another house in Sussex where I spend most of my time. It's quite near London. It's moated and traces off into lakes. I mean, I could tell you things, but it might give people ideas. A few things that have happened that would freak some people out. But I was surprised actually at how composed I was. I don't really want to go on about my personal beliefs or my involvement in magic. I'm not trying to do a Harrison or Townshend. I'm not interested in turning anybody onto anybody that I'm turned onto. So if people want to find things, they find things themselves. I'm a firm believer in that. So is Jimmy Page's purchasing of Aleister Crowley's house and some of his belongings, along with being interested in mysticism and the occult, enough to really tie Led Zeppelin to the occult? So before we jump to conclusions, let's take a momentary side quest to get some context of the occult in the 1960s and 70s. Interest of the occult in the 1970s was a complex phenomenon.
It's interesting. It's an interesting phenomenon is what it is. That's a damn phenomenon.
And cannot be attributed to a single motivation. However, several key factors did shape the interest during that time. So we have countercultural movements. So in the late 1960s and 70s, we saw a significant countercultural movement that challenged traditional values and norms. This movement embraced various forms of mysticism and spirituality as alternatives to mainstream religion and culture. The sexual revolution in the 1960s and 70s promoted greater openness about sexuality and sought to break free from traditional sexual norms. Occult practices often included elements of sexual liberation and experimentation, appealing to those looking to explore their sexuality in new ways. Then we have personal rights and freedom. So this era emphasized personal freedom and self-expression.
I thought this was America. Huh? Isn't this America?
The occult, with its focus on personal empowerment and esoteric knowledge, resonated with individuals seeking to define their own spiritual paths and reject societal constraints. Many people turn to the occult as a means of self-discovery and personal growth. Practices such as meditation, astrology, and tarot reading offered ways to explore the inner self and gain deeper ways and insights into one's life and purpose. Then we have esoteric and mystical interests. While sexual liberation and personal rights were significant aspects, genuine interest in esoteric and mystical practices was also a driving force. Many were drawn to the occult for its promises of hidden knowledge, spiritual enlightenment, and the interest in the occult from a breakout young musician with money and power and influence makes a lot of sense. Then we have the symbols and imagery that Led Zeppelin has used in the past. So the band's fourth album, which is often referred to as Led Zeppelin 4 or the Untitled album, featured symbols representing each band member. Jimmy Page's symbol is often known as Zoso, and it's interpreted as having occult significance, though Jimmy Page has never fully explained its meaning. While the inside cover depicts the hermit, an ancient figure used in tarot, the iconic cover of Led Zeppelin 4 was the old man with a bundle of sticks on his back. That actually came from a colorized picture that Jimmy Page and Robert Plant found at an antique shop near Jimmy Page's home in Pangbourne, Berkshire. Jimmy Page, quote unquote, says, "I used to spend a lot of time going to junk shops looking for things that other people might have missed." Page said at the time, "Robert was on a search with me one time and we went to a place in the reading where things were just piled up on one another. Robert found the picture of the old man with sticks and suggested that we work it into our cover somehow. So we decided to contrast the modern skyscraper. Album's artwork has led fans to speculate over the years who the figure might be and what was the hidden meaning that it may have. Some have said the picture depicts Harry Brusher Mills, who was a hermit and snake catcher who lived near the New Forest. Others have claimed it to be folk magician George Pickingale, Victorian farm laborer and local healer, which basically introduced Jimmy Page to Aleister Crowley. Rumors and speculations about the band. One of Led Zeppelin's most famous songs, Stairway to Heaven, we all know it, has been the subject of numerous backward maskings allegations, with some claiming it contains hidden satanic messages when played in reverse. These claims, however, are largely considered to be urban legends. Some listeners claimed that the reverse lyrics include phrases like, "Here's to my sweet Satan," and "I sing because I live with Satan." These allegations of backward masking became particularly popular in the 1980s during the rise of satanic panic. The lyrics' mystical and ambiguous nature has fueled these interpretations.
Backwards it says, "'Cause I live with Satan." Listen carefully. Raise your hands if you heard that. Quite clear, quite obvious.
Then we have the band's denial. Led Zeppelin members, including Robert Plant and Jimmy Page, have consistently denied these claims. Plant has called this idea ridiculous, and that Jimmy Page says that if there was messages, it wasn't intentional. And then we have the curse of Led Zeppelin. There have, of course, been rumors of a curse on the band linked to their alleged involvements with the occult. This is often cited in connection with a series of unfortunate events that befell the band members, including the 75 car crash with Robert Plant and his family, the death of his son Carrick, and the untimely death of John Bonham, And then, of course, Richard Cole and Jimmy Page's heroin addiction and the eventual lawsuits that they faced for their plagiarism and whatnot. So the conception of the Led Zeppelin curse is a construct of media speculation and fan lore, which intertwining the real-life tragedies that the band have faced and their association with the occult. While the notion of the curse is more myth than reality, the unfortunate events that have touched the lives of Led Zeppelin have contributed to this enduring and dramatic narrative. And of course, despite the rumors, band members, including Jimmy Page, have often downplayed the extent of their involvement in the occult. Jimmy Page has acknowledged his interest in Aleister Crowley, of course, but has dismissed more extravagant claims as exaggerations or fabrications. So now I have here, in a now deleted interview on French TV, Jimmy Page is asked directly about his interest with Aleister Crowley and the band's mysticism. Led Zeppelin was bathed in an atmosphere that was a little Satanist, Lucifer, black magic. You were into that era? I was interested in the mysticism, but what was my main interest was Led Zeppelin. Day and night I drank and ate Led Zeppelin. This is what I was most interested in. So you're a great admirer of Aleister Crowley. Great magician or notorious crook, the opinions differ greatly. In Mexico, he succeeded in making his reflection in a mirror disappear. You are aware of this story? I know all sorts of stories about the man, but what he was saying in his time was that with willpower you can achieve anything. It's also gender equality that preconized him. Oh yes, he certainly was a visionary ahead of his time. I did read his works, but I read other authors as well. Crowley wasn't my primary motivation. Bro, that's so cool. Alright, girl. Still, you bought everything Crowley, didn't you? His books, trinkets. You even bought his house on Loughnan. That's true, and if you have seen his house, you would have bought it. Very nice house right on the lake of Loughnan. Spectacular. Magnificent. You say he invented the total liberation of the individual? Yes, certainly. That's probably the biggest contribution. In a more recent interview, Jimmy Page speaks openly and nonchalantly about his interest in Crowley and the occult during his time with Led Zeppelin.
Your involvement in the Golden Dawn?
Oh, my involvement in the Golden Dawn is in so much as I was very interested actually in Eastern and Western mysticism, and I spent time reading and researching when I was younger. Yeah, I guess that's it. That's there were some very eminent characters in the Golden Dawn, and I found it very interesting to see the history of those that had been in it, and this sort of esoteric movement, and also sort of what went on, the offshoots of it, of that sort of love of all things mystical and magical, all things bright and beautiful, really.
Do you think that's why people did that thing when they played Stairway to Heaven backwards and said that you were talking about Satan?
Yeah, well, you know, I'm going to go straight back to the Beatles here, because there was a time when somebody wrote a thesis about Paul McCartney being dead, and Paul is dead. And if you played back the records, I'm very serious here, it's crazy, but if you played back the records, there was something which said Paul is dead. And so then they started to play back all manner of records, and of course we were going to be main candidates for it. And somebody said, oh, it says My Sweet Satan in it. And I thought, oh gosh, it's hard enough writing the music one way round rather than that way.
Very nice. Cool interview. And I have one more interview to describe here for you. In a UNCUT UK interview, John Paul Jones is asked about Jimmy's occult interests. When did you find out, and how did you find out, that he had an interest in Aleister Crowley and the occult? John Paul Jones answers, quite early on, he was always talking about it. I didn't actually have the interest in it, so I kind of left it to him. The Boleskine House. He didn't talk about it much with the band. It was more of a private thing. Interviewer asks, you didn't go to Boleskine House? JPJ, no, I never went up there. Interviewer, but I mean, did you have a mental picture of him wearing a cape, casting spells and things? JPJ laughs. Now that you've put it in my mind, no, I basically didn't really give it any thought. That was his business. It was not an interest of mine. So there we go. So to sum this all up,
What you see is a woman, which you probably can't see from back there because she's in black, she's not shining white light at all, and she's climbing a mountain. Does it look like it leads to heaven?
unfortunately, it seems, after all, the association between Led Zeppelin and the occult is mostly driven by Jimmy Page and his interest in Aleister Crowley, mysticism, symbols, and the imagery in the band's work. So while rumors and speculations have amplified this association, the actual extent of their involvement remains a mix of documented and mythologized narratives. But maybe, just maybe, Jimmy Page is the secret new leader of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Maybe he regularly performs occult ritual, maybe sacrifices or curse or whatever at the Boleskine House. He could go back, I don't know, to propel him and maybe Led Zeppelin even now to greater success. Maybe I'm being summoned here to talk Led Zeppelin lore. Maybe I am a little demon pawn thing. I don't know how it all works. You guys don't know. But from all my research and digging about Led Zeppelin and the occult and reading about it when I was younger, I can't really find much convincing evidence that Jimmy Page is the devil. He's definitely not the devil. But he may have dabbled in some magic in the past, you know? He seems more of the type nowadays to stumble around his humble abode, maybe puttering around his mansion with his controversially young girlfriend, maybe taking neighbors to court over renovation plans, and also forever promising to begin or release new projects. He seems more like that type of guy. I don't think we'll hear anything from him in a long time. But who knows? I would love to hear some Jimmy Page stuff. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. I love Jimmy Page. He is very important to me. I know I don't know him personally, and he probably thinks it's weird people care about him in that way. But the fact that he produced so much music that people love and grew up with, could listen to during hard times in their lives. Led Zeppelin's really nostalgic and just important to me. So I always will appreciate their music, and I love talking about them because I love talking about things I love. Who doesn't? Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. Hope you pull out your tarot card deck tonight. And, maybe we can do some magic after watching this video. I don't know. Go listen to Led Zeppelin, okay? Alright guys. Peace and love. Love to you all. Take good care of yourselves. Stay hydrated. And don't do anything I want to do. Alright guys. Peace.